Hi there. Today I'm looking at the Nexigo Iris webcam. But I must point out two things before I begin. Firstly, this isn't it. This is the MacBook webcam, and I'm using this as a starting point because I think a lot of people will use something like this on their laptop, the standard kind of built-in webcam. Second thing is this is going to be a pretty rough and ready review. I'm kind of just going to go along and test things out as I'm chatting to you. So if you're happy with that, then please stay with me. So right now, this is the MacBook webcam, and I'm also using the MacBook audio, which I actually think is quite good. Usually the audio coming from the MacBook microphone is okay. But the image quality on this camera is dreadful. I'm using this in what I would class as a real life situation right now. Okay, I've got a few coloured lights on in the background and stuff. I just kind of have that sort of thing on. But the actual webcam, well, there's light coming in from the window and I've got no additional lighting at all. It is just, it's a dull day. It's actually fairly dark in here, which is why these lights look so bright in the background. So what I'm going to do now anyway is switch over to the alternative. So this, I'm going to switch over now to the Nexigo Iris webcam. So there we go. We're now on that. I've kind of tried to put them at the same height, but they are framed differently right now, and I can change that in a second. But this is the Nexigo camera. I'm still on the MacBook microphone right now, but let's try the Nexigo mic. I'm not a big fan of it. Actually. So there we go. We're now on the Nexigo microphone, and it has kind of dual array microphones either side of the lens. It's got a kind of built-on noise reduction, which you'll probably hear sort of kick in as I use the mic a little bit more. But it's okay. It's clear. And it does its job. I guess it does its job as well as it needs to for a webcam. This is not going to be stream quality. It's not going to be studio quality. It's just sounds like a webcam, doesn't it? So it's bold, it's clear, it's a little bit kind of brash and roomy sort of sounding. Sounds like you're in a bathroom or something like that, even though I'm in a sort of fairly treated room in here. But what I thought I would also do is throw on a Rode wireless mic as well. So I can switch to that now. And you can see that overall, between the three, this is probably the best choice. This is the most consistent. And if you could arrange to have something like this, brilliant, you know. I think the best webcam I've ever tested, and I use pretty much every day, is the ZV-E10 from Sony, the vlogging camera, but that's a £750 camera. We're looking now at a webcam. This is a $250 webcam, so £250 I think it retails at, or will retail at. So it's not a cheap webcam, it's really up there with a kind of more expensive webcams, but it's still a much cheaper camera, a much cheaper alternative than spending loads of money on a proper kind of point and shoot style video camera, mirrorless camera. So the image quality, as you can see from this, I'll just quickly switch back to the other one again, and you can just have a comparison. So colours are good on the MacBook. I like the colours on the MacBook. They're fine. It deals with the bright lights behind much better. It clearly seems to be much more processing going on the MacBook image. But goddamn, that noise reduction looks dreadful. It's so messy. So let's just switch that back again. And you can see that this, to me anyway, is a much nicer image. At the moment, what I'm doing is I'm outputting this into a 1080p 60 frames per second stream, but the actual image coming from the Nexigo camera is a 3840 by 2160, so 4K or UHD, 30 frames per second image, and it being rescaled. I'm using OBS to record here. It's being rescaled in OBS on the fly. So what you're seeing is, you know, a kind of nice, sharp, reduced 4K image into a 1080p frame, which is kind of what you're going to get if you use this on any kind of call. Because if you're using this on Zoom, if you're using this on Teams, anything like that, the most I've ever seen Teams use and this is on a one-to-one conversation, so one person talking to another, no additional kind of people in a conference call, is 720p. So 1280 by 720. That's the best resolution I've ever seen Teams do on my work laptop. And at that resolution, this camera, it immediately kind of wows people, because you put it on, they're just like, oh, God, you know, Torsten, your camera's like always so sharp, it's always so clear, blah, blah, blah. And people notice it straight away. And this is people who don't care about cameras. They notice the difference straight away with a camera like this, over and above the kind of camera like this. I mean, yeah, this still looks okay if you're on a call, but a camera like the Nexigo looks a step up from okay. So let's I'm just going to switch over to a screen that I've got here. And let's just have a look at the website of Nexigo. Yeah, so this is what the camera comes with. We have the actual main camera itself, which you can see on the picture there. And to me, this sort of whole camera here looks a little bit dated. It looks a little bit kind of so maybe 2000, 2005 style. And I'm not a real fan of the styling of this webcam at all. And it is huge too. It is a good sort of 15 centimeters from one side to the other. And it's heavy. It's also a little bit front heavy too. So when you sit it on top of the screen, you've got to be quite careful for it not to kind of just drop off. If you kind of knock your desk or something by mistake, it can drop off. And I have done that. I have knocked the camera off the top of my monitor here, and it fell down and hit my MacBook screen. And let me just switch back to this image here. These sharp edges here, this is metal, this whole front bit, this whole bit, this is plastic here, but this whole top bit here is metal. And these bits, they scratched the front of my screen. And I was really gutted at the time, because I've got permanent marks on the screen now when there's certain colours and things like that. It's almost like having a couple of, a few dead pixels, or quite a few dead pixels on the screen. It's not damaged, the screen, it's just the front cover that's damaged, but it's still quite a hefty webcam, and it is fairly sharp, those edge bits, so you don't want that falling onto your webcam. So what I'm suggesting to you is that you mount it on a tripod if you can. It has a tripod, a 1/4-20 thread on the bottom, and I recommend that you put it on there. Yeah, so it comes up with a nice remote control. I like this. No, not much zoom on that, is there? There we go. I like this remote control. Oh, come on, what are you doing? Remote control. The previous one, so the 970p that I reviewed, came with a remote control that had tons and tons of buttons on, all of which, or like half of which, did absolutely nothing. It clearly wasn't a product that was designed for the camera. Whereas this is a remote control that has been designed for this particular camera. And it has all the sort of features, it covers all the features as well. And this allows you to do all the zoom and changing modes and adding presets for zooms and all that sort of stuff. It's really good. Comes with a good, I think 3-meter USB-B super speed cable. So USB-B, I don't know what, it's a chunky cable, and I don't know, I'm not quite sure why they're using this still on their cameras. I sort of think, well, why wouldn't you use a USB-C? Because surely it can carry the necessary data, can support the necessary format and power. You can easily deliver that kind of power up USB-C. And I just don't know why they're still using these big, thick cables, because the problem is that those cables on a small device, if you're putting that on the top of your screen, that becomes the kind of leverage then. You can, you just move the cable and the whole camera just goes whoom and flips off the top of the screen. It's really irritating actually to use. Fine again if you're on a tripod and you've got it all locked down nicely, the cable just sits there and it's a chunky cable. But I just think, why not just have maybe a nice braided USB-C solution in the back? Maybe there's a reason for it, I don't know. But to me, it just seems a bit dated now that using that USB-B solution, because it is just so chunky that it just pulls the camera around really, really easily. And again, they provide a, can I find it here now? No, they provide a USB-A to USB-C adapter, but there is no way I would put that in my MacBook. I'd put it in a hub, you know, but I'm not going to risk the ports because, again, with a thick cable like that and a bigger connector on the outside than the sort of inside, there's so much sort of leverage on that, so much kind of like force being applied to the port that I'm not risking my Thunderbolt ports on my MacBook for a webcam. It's not happening. Right, anyway, moving on. What else have we got here? I can flick through the images from here, can't I? Right, so this is the big deal about this camera. It's all about the sensor. This camera has, apparently, according to this picture anyway, and according to their marketing, has the largest sensor ever. It's got a 1/1/8 inch Sony Starvis sensor, which is a really good performing sensor in low light. It's used, I think, on CCTV, like high quality CCTV cameras as well. And it's, according to this, to say the largest sensor that exists in a webcam today. It's really good in low light, or you can see from this that the performance in this low light in this room is good. It's not so good at really low light compared to the MacBook, but it is good in this kind of low light here. And yeah, so they're saying it's improved. It's much bigger than an iPhone 13. And here you go, you've got an example of what other webcams are like. So yeah, decent sensor. Low light correction options, I'll go over those later. Smart AI features, which again, the idea is that with smart AI is that it kind of tracks you. So if you enable it, it will follow, it'll zoom into your face, and then it'll kind of, as you move, it'll zoom in. And if you've got someone sat further back in a room, it'll kind of zoom in on them. And it does work, but it's not too relevant for me. If you're using this in a meeting room scenario, maybe, yeah, maybe I can see that could be useful then. What else have we got here? And oh yeah, onboard flash memory. And this, again, is a huge deal. I'm going the wrong way on my screen here. This is a huge deal because the biggest thing with webcams is that they lose their settings when they're turned off. They lose, you know, you put it on a different device, it doesn't have the settings set up. Well, this webcam does. It has everything on flash memory on board the camera itself. Those settings are not software dependent. They're not hardware dependent. They're camera. They're based on the camera. So if I take this camera upstairs now and put it on the PC upstairs, it will work in the same way. It'll still have those kind of modes enabled. It'll still have those presets enabled, those zoom presets. Everything is on board, and that's such a big deal. And the N970p that I reviewed was exactly the same, and it is just essential in a web. I could not go back to a webcam that doesn't have that now, because being able to just put all your settings in and know they're staying there is great. Right, what else do we have? Okay, multiple zoom modes. Now, the point of this is that because there's no actual zoom on the lens, it's not optical zoom, it's digital zoom, but because it's generating a 4K image, and as I said before, I'm outputting at the moment to 1080p, you can effectively zoom up to 4 times and not get any real loss of quality. You're still taking kind of, if you're zooming in to 4 times, you're still taking HD, so 1080p, natively off the sensor at that zoom level. Anything beyond that, and you're then into the realms of digital zoom, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody, even though you can do it on here up to 1080p. I've messed this up again, haven't I? Right. Okay, what's next? Uncompressed 4K video. So another big feature is that it has an HDMI port on the back. So you can output uncompressed video into a recorder of some kind, or into a monitor, or stick it on a TV, or I don't know, whatever you want. That option to have HD coming out, and the HD can be 4K as well. It can be 4K 30p, it can be 1080p. If it's supported on the computer side, it can be 1080p up to 60 frames per second. But you know, I've got my Shogun Inferno recorder here, and I could stick the HDMI out from this camera and record it directly on there instead, and then sync up the audio later. So this opens up, for a camera of this type, opens up so many more options as far as use goes, because it has the convenience of a webcam, but it's still kind of got features that you can set exposure, you can fix exposure, you can calibrate white balance, you've got HDMI so you've got HDMI uncompressed out into, you know, your recorder, and it's just great. So yeah, you can chuck this into a streaming device, for example. I can put the HDMI out into the YOLO box here, for example, and stream using it as a camera source. It does support webcam, but
yeah, better if you're using HDMI. So this 4K HDMI out is really, really good feature. Okay, so the microphones you've heard there, they're not brilliant. They do the job, but they're not brilliant. We'll ignore that. Picture-in-picture mode. Well, I'll go over that. I'll show you that in a second, but I haven't really got a setup here. The idea being that you have your main frame, which you can then zoom into let's say you've got a board. You can zoom it into the board and show that clearly as your main frame, and then you've got and then the camera will track your face separately and put you in the corner, which again, if you're stood and doing a presentation like this guy is here, this very sort of sharp guy here with his glasses on, his nice sharp suit, then yeah, it just means you get that kind of layout there, which can be good for a meeting. So this is the only one I kind of question a little bit. DSLR quality with webcam convenience. Well, it isn't. It's not DSLR quality. It's good quality, and it's, for a webcam, is great quality, but it's not DSLR quality. I wouldn't make that claim at all. And as I mentioned before, just the mirrorless ZV-E10 from Sony that I could put up here as a webcam and use as a 1080p 60 frames per second webcam is better quality. It just allows that soft background, just slight kind of bit of bokeh in the background, and the color quality is usually better. The tracking on the autofocus is fantastic because it locks onto your eye and it does all that sort of stuff. This is a fixed focus camera, so I can't hold up a product and say, oh, look at this, and let it focus. Here's the remote for the camera, let it focus. Because it won't focus, it's just a fixed focus camera. So it's not a DSLR because you can't focus the thing, but it is an extremely flexible webcam and it has some great tricks. That's the main kind of features of the webcam. Let's have a look at the actual menus on the webcam and show you a little bit more about those. So the button on this main button on the front here, this one, this is one of the key ones that switches between your 3 modes. Now they are preset as meeting mode, streaming mode, and something else, low light mode or something like that. But they're effectively just 3 presets that allow you to set the camera up completely differently for different environments. You don't have to stick to it being a meeting or anything like that. They've just put some basic stuff in there that might work for a meeting and might work for streaming. For example, on the streaming mode, they lock off the exposure. It's fixed with a shutter priority, and as the shutter is set, and then it changes the gain settings to an ISO setting, and you can fix that, you know, put that to whatever you want. So let's open up the menus on here and see what we've got. So under setup to start with, so these we can switch between our modes here. So if I go on to low light, if I go into meeting mode now, you can see I've already got this set up to be a bit more zoomed in on meeting mode because I prefer it like this. If I'm on a call with work, I don't want people seeing all this mess in the background. So I would use it like this for a meeting, which, you know, maybe a bit more zoomed out. I don't know. And then you can change the, I'm going to just switch that back to streaming mode for now as well. So you can switch this to the mic audio. You can turn the mic on the camera. You can turn it off completely. And you can adjust the gain of the mic too. So by default, the gain's set right up and it's just too high. It picks up absolutely every sound. It tries to block it out with the noise reduction, but it just picks up tons of sound. So I wouldn't have that quite so high. You can flip the on-screen menu and then you can change the maximum pan, tilt, zoom level. So at the moment it's set to 1 to 5 times because I wouldn't want to go above 5 times. Even 5 times is taking it into non sort of pixel relative zoom. It's actual proper digital zoom then. So, you know, I think they should really set this to 1 to 4 times to make it 1080p. But if you're doing 720p, then you're still in good. Yeah, you're still doing all right. Then you've got USB mode, which is always set to bulk. No idea what the others are. Don't know. I'm not going to change that now because I think it requires the camera to kind of shut down and restart. Okay, onboard AI. So we've got these 2 modes here, auto framing and auto tracking. Auto tracking follows you in real time and auto framing keeps everybody else centered. I'm not quite, what's the difference really? I'm not absolutely sure what the difference is in that, but then I've never used this in a room full of people. But if I enable auto tracking mode now, and So if I just sort of sit a bit further back from the camera, you can see that it starts to bring me in. And if I zoom, if I sort of move over like this, it just kind of follows me around a little bit like this. But as I mentioned in my previous video, which was just commented on by someone, I think from Nexigo, the framing isn't particularly nice. It's kind of, I'd prefer myself to be kind of in the top thirds kind of thing, but instead it just centers everything. And I don't know, to me, it doesn't look great. It's not exactly ideal framing. What happens if I do? What happens if I can zoom right back? If I go sit right back? It's all right though. I mean, I can see it has some merit, particularly if you are moving around quite a bit, if you're walking around. So that's auto tracking anyway. And then we have auto framing, which it says in here keeps everybody centered. Well, I don't have anyone else in the room, so I'm not going to try that because there's no one, no one else to work to use this with. So picture-in-picture mode. Well, let's put this on. So right now you can see that this is sort of pointless, isn't it? Because all you've got is me and me. So what's the point of that? But if I go out of here now and I, let's say in the background here on the wall was my whiteboard, and this was my kind of presentation stuff. So what I can do is I can set up the camera to be zoomed in on that whiteboard, maybe something like that. Let me just zoom. Okay, well that's my maximum zoom right now because I had this set to 5 times. But let me just set myself. So what I've done now, you can see that the camera. So I've got my main kind of presentation here set up, and you can see the board in the background. But the camera is staying on me. So even though I'm sat way to the side now, it's keeping zoomed in, and it's keeping my sort of me in the corner of the screen. So you can zoom in on a presentation, but still have me sat there as well. I think it's a nice feature, that, isn't it? I mean, I don't know how many times I would personally use it, but I do think that's a really good, it's a really nice bit of AI, useful bit of AI. But I've now got everything zoomed in, haven't I? So let's go right out again. And do all this from the remote control. It's really cool. And let's go back to onboard. So you also have a facial enhancement option as well, which just kind of boosts the whole image, I think. I don't think it does anything. I don't think it softens the skin or anything. But yeah, you could say that's nicer lighting, actually. I probably got the lighting set a bit wrong. But it's just getting darker and darker in here. I'm struggling for light. I hope this is still looking okay on the camera. I wouldn't usually use a camera like this. I would usually have extra lights in the room to actually light my sort of, light the room here while I'm even on a call at work. I would usually do that. Okay, exposure options. So we're on auto at the moment. You've got exposure compensation on here too. You've got backlight compensation as well, flicker reduction. And then you can set a gain limit so that if it does start getting dark, it won't increase it too much, because sometimes you just don't want it to, because otherwise you just get into a mass of noise and a big mess. And then you've got dynamic range setting as well. I'm not quite sure. What does that actually? Okay, it doesn't seem to make too much difference. It might do if it was a brighter scene or something. But the most useful thing here is you can switch the modes with exposure. So I can switch this now to, let's not say, so we've got brightness priority, but shutter priority is fantastic. And this is what you're going to need if you're doing any kind of streaming or you want a bit more control with your camera, because we've now got independent control of the ISO, and I can fix this. I can drop this right down if I want, and then I can say, right, okay, I want it to be ISO 100 because I want it to look the best, but I need to light the room more. And I can do that. Well, I could do that if I had my phone with me, but I don't. Okay, hang on a second. So there we go. So we've now got, so I put a bit of fill light in at the side there. So now I'm lighting the scene with my own lights, and that's allowed me to reduce this right down to ISO 100. So if I put it back to where it was, which was 800, that'd be way too bright. So we can just get everything set as we want it. And there we go. We've got a great looking image, fixed exposure. Fantastic. That's what you want, isn't it? And then under the color settings, now we've got white, we've got white balance mode. Now the white balance modes are strange. You can configure these, you can adjust the red and the blue separately from each other. You can adjust the saturation of the image. You could say this is maybe a little undersaturated. Usually comes in a little, probably I'd say that is a little bit better. A little bit, adds a bit of warmth as well at the same time. You can adjust the hue and the sensitivity. But you can also do a custom calibration too, which is fantastic. So you can set custom mode on here, but custom mode just doesn't work. It's weird. Because look, if I set this down here, that's way too cool, obviously. But if I set this up here, with my lights are about 5,400 Kelvin. So I want to set this to here, but that looks awful, doesn't it? So you kind of think, okay, well, it's the tint that's off here because this is a bit too green. I need a bit more magenta in here. But look, tint doesn't work quite the same as you might expect. See, look, definitely don't want to go that way. And I definitely don't want to go that way either. So custom white balance is just a waste of time on this camera. Okay, so sorry, go back into white balance. Now, so auto looks generally does a pretty good job in most cases. I mean, I'm being quite generous today because I'm giving it a nice grey top to work with, which is always good for a camera. But you can do set it all up manually as well if you want. But here we go, calibration mode. Now this is good because I've actually got a grey card here, which I can use to calibrate it. Again, not everyone's going to have this stuff, but if you're serious about your sort of webcams and you're serious about your sort of filming and things like that, you're going to have one of these. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hold this up and I'm going to do a calibration in this light by pressing the home button on the remote control. And there we go. We've now got a custom white balance for this particular lighting setup. And yeah, I mean, how many webcams can you do that on? Image, we can adjust all parameters of the image you might want to. I've never had any reason to change this, but you can if you want. There's even a black and white mode. Again, why do I want to use this in black and white? But it's there. It might as well put it in. I guess it's not too difficult to put in. You can adjust the gamma. I'm not going to do that because this is working fine as it is. The default always tends to work fine, but you can adjust it between 3.4, 3.9, 4.7, 5.0. Default works okay. And HDR, well, again, I'm not quite sure. Doesn't seem to make any difference as far as any lighting in the background is concerned or anything like that. I guess this could work if you're doing an HDMI out into a recorder that could support it, maybe. But I just leave it off and because it works fine for what I want. Noise reduction settings. So let's test these out. What I'm going to do, I'm going to kill my lights again in here. I'm going to get this image looking a bit more noisy. So, okay, so the image itself is no good right now because we're using a fixed exposure. So I'm going to go back to auto exposure on here. And so we're now back at a reasonable level. So there probably is some noise coming in now because it is getting quite dark in here. And let's just lower the blind a bit too, because I want this to be quite a noisy image. All right, so it looks like now what we've done, we've now hit the gain limit as well on here. So I need to go back into exposure and increase the gain limit on here to bring this up. So once you get into these kind of levels, this camera, it doesn't look great. It doesn't perform that well, but let's see what we can do with the noise reduction, see if it makes any difference. So if I add some additional 2D noise reduction, what does that do? Probably, can I zoom in on this while it's, no, I can't zoom in while it's in the menus. So I've got any artifacts on here? It's hard to see. Oh, let's tell you what, switch between off and full. Hold on. Right, so there we go. There's full 2D noise reduction, and that's off. Nice that you can turn the noise reduction off completely if you want. And let's try 3D noise reduction. Let's go off. So this is the camera now in low light with no noise reduction at all, which is looking a bit grainy, but never mind. And there we go. So we're up to 9 on 3D noise reduction. Wow. Okay, so this is the one that on the left, look at the ghosting. The ghosting on that. Right, so 3D noise reduction doesn't seem to work. 2D noise reduction, on the other hand, might help you. Or maybe a bit of 3D. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, play around play around as much as you like, because you can. I'm just going to put the blinds up again, and I'm going to actually disable noise reduction on here now, because I don't think we need it. Cool. And then we got our video format, so HDMI on, and we can choose for 4K, or we can have it only output in 1080p, or change the frame rate and stuff like that. You know, there's like full options on this around, you know, real proper camera options. And then just some information about the firmware and what mode we're in, and then restoring the default. There we go. So this is like a serious webcam. It comes at a serious price. £250 for a webcam is a lot. It's a lot of money. This thing gets warm while you're using it because it's doing so much work on board the camera. But you can mess around until your heart's content, as I say, and get an image that is just absolutely superb for a webcam, and pretty good for any other kind of camera too. Sure, the fixed focus is annoying. You know, that's going to limit the options for many people who are wanting to maybe show a product or anything like that. But if you just want to have something like this, where if I just want to record a quick piece to camera and use the Rode wireless mic and record it in OBS as I am at the moment, well, this is just perfect. So anyway, this is the Nexigo Iris webcam. I'll put links in the description so you can check it out for yourself and see what the price is in your local area. They are affiliate links with Amazon. So yeah, I'll get a small commission on that if you choose to click on it, but that's entirely up to you. But thanks very much for watching. I hope you found this rather long sort of playing around with the camera, just trying things out, useful. And if you did, put it in the comments. I know it was a long video, but hopefully it's okay for you. And I will see you next time.